Being labeled the most valuable company in the world is quite the title. There are literally hundreds of millions of companies around the globe raking in profits, so being recognized as the one sitting on the most coinage is certainly an achievement, to say the least. The company's offering is arguably the most sought-after resource this planet has to offer, impacting all our lives on a daily basis. Now, most of you watching would probably poke a guess at the most valuable company in the world being Google, Amazon, or some other household name. However, the title surprisingly belongs to a company that many of you will never have even heard of, a company that goes by the name of Saudi Aramco. Despite its low profile and lack of media presence, Saudi Aramco is the international leader of the world's most important and sought-after commodity. This global superpower has recently been valued at such an astronomical value, it crushes the runner-up in the prestigious rich list by almost $500 billion. Yeah, these are some pretty big numbers we're throwing out here, but that's to be expected when discussing companies of such huge magnitude. The size and reach of Saudi Aramco is pretty hard to comprehend. However, it is pretty easy to put it neatly in perspective. Aramco's reported income in 2018 was larger than all 5 of its closest industry competitors combined. The $111 billion profit that Aramco boasted that year was almost double that of tech giant Apple, the second most valuable company in the world, which achieved a now almost modest-sounding $59.4 billion during the very same year. The first half of 2019 saw Aramco turning a profit of $46.9 billion. The full year's report is yet to be released publicly, but is expected to hover around the $100 billion mark. This might be slightly less than the previous calendar year, but is still more than enough to plonk it securely on the top spot coming in 2020. The colossal dominance of Saudi Aramco amongst other financial giants is almost humorous. Such obscene numbers sitting on their bottom line year on year is unheard of in any other company, and its total net worth is even more jaw-dropping. As of January 20th, 2020, Saudi Aramco is valued at a staggering $1.88 trillion. Remember when $1 billion sounded like a lot? Well, those days are long gone. To get an idea of how much money $1 trillion really is, I like to think of it like this. If you were to be given $1 per second, it would take just under 12 days for you to make $1 million. To bump that up to $1 billion, it would take you almost 32 years. And if you waited around to make $1 trillion, you would be collecting those singles for nearly 32,000 years. Saudi Aramco is quickly steam training its way towards a valuation of not $1, but $2 trillion. So how exactly do they do it? Now, something I'm yet to mention to you is that Saudi Aramco is more than just a company. It is, in fact, the bejeweled beneficiary of the Saudi state-crowned prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who also happens to be one of the richest, most powerful men on the planet. As I'm sure you can imagine, owning the most valuable company in the world certainly has its advantages. Having a near $2 trillion business on your portfolio undoubtedly gives you some governmental leverage. Way back in the first quarter of 2016, Mohammed bin Salman announced that he would be putting Saudi Aramco into the open market to fund his 2030 program. If you are yet to hear about this so-called 2030 program, it is a set of plans being put in place by the Saudi prince to reduce the country's financial dependence on raw materials. Currently, around 70% of the government's total income and 80% of its export revenue is dependent on the raw material sector. This lack of diversity is rather concerning, especially when the entire country's economic stability is at the helm of natural products that can and will eventually run out. The plan to bring Aramco to the stock exchange to fund this project was ambitious, to say the least, and many experts are still debating whether or not it was a good move by the billionaire. Although what is an undeniable fact is that the shift from privately owned to partially public skyrocketed the company to new financial heights. It took barely a few days for Saudi Aramco's market value to creep just shy of $2 trillion as a result of its first public offering. While the initial plan was to sell off 5% of the company's shares via the most significant global markets and to raise $100 billion, the venture manifested itself into the sales of just 1.5% and a kitty of $25.6 billion. This was not the market entrance that Mohammed bin Salman envisioned, but it was still enough to be recorded as the biggest initial public offering ever, surpassing Alibaba's IPO back in 2014, and enough to cement Saudi Aramco as the most valuable company in the world by quite some margin. If you haven't guessed it already, Saudi Aramco's wealth is mostly thanks to the extraction and refinement of what I like to call black gold. Saudi Arabia sits on seemingly endless wells of crude oil, and these underground lakes are the lifeblood of both Aramco and the global economy. Saudi Aramco oil has been powering the world for almost 100 years, and in 2018 it hit an all-time production high, producing 13.6 million barrels of crude oil every single day, which is more than any other company ever. The story of Saudi Aramco's wealth spans all the way back to the 1930s, when Saudi was just another barren Middle Eastern state with nothing but sand dunes and aimlessly wandering camels. In a ploy to kickstart the development of the country, the leader of the time, Ibn Saud, shook on a deal with American oil company SoCal, offering them the right to search for oil along Saudi's eastern coast in return for capital. Years and many dry wells later, SoCal eventually struck oil, opening the floodgates to what would eventually lead to Saudi Aramco's crude oil empire. By 1970, Saudi oil was already a big player in the international markets, and when US drills started to run dry and American production dropped, the Middle East took the opportunity to capitalize. Saudi Arabia spent the next 10 years negotiating the buyback of all Aramco shares. It took plenty of leverage and rumored backhand deals, but by 1980, it was theirs. Now, with a majority of market share, the new Saudi Aramco had immense control over the price and distribution of oil. The country that once had nothing to sell now had what the entire world not only wanted, but needed more than anything. The years that followed saw rapid expansion and never-ending increase in demand, which brings us all the way up to the current day. As it stands, Saudi Aramco is the leader of oil production globally. It holds 10% of the world's entire oil reserves, and it owns the biggest oil refinery in the United States. Becoming the world's most valuable company did not merely happen overnight, and if it wasn't for an opportunist Saudi king back in the 1930s, the title might have fallen to one of the tech giants mentioned earlier in this video. Saudi Aramco holds more wealth than many countries around the world. It has the power to change the entire global economy at the drop of a hat, and essentially dictates how much it costs you to fill up at the gas station. As the company starts to invest in new markets and create new assets, who knows if its financial value will ever be surpassed.